McFadden is present, and Teresa is present.
Your Honor, may the parties approach?
You may.
Thank you. This time, Mr. Stewart,
Proceed.
I can ask permission to publish Base Exhibit 389 marked for identification.
Permission.
May I special witness to step down and vote on it first?
All right, you may do so.
Thank you.
And you understand your silver oath?
I do, Your Honor.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, Special Agent Easter, I want to turn your attention to the first page of Space Exhibit 389 marked for identification. Do you recognize this?
Yes, this is the header slide for the analysis that I completed for the phone number ending in 5332, which was provided to me as a number associated with Carly Scott.
And going to page 2, is this the same information that you had on the previous Exhibit 388?
Yes, sir, it is.
I'm going to go on to page 3. Again, is this the same information that you had discussed earlier in State's Exhibit 388?
Yes, sir.
Turning your attention to page 4 of State's Exhibit 389 for identification. What are we looking at here, Special Agent?
We're looking at AT&T records still. Carly Scott's phone was also AT&T. We're looking at February 8th from 5:01 p.m. to 9:28 p.m. We can see there wasn't a lot of activity. We have, in fact, let me rephrase that, 5:01 p.m. and 9:28. So we have one call at 5:01 and one text at 9:28. And that utilized the tower and sector that's on Haleakala. And again, 2053 and 2059 were the sector. And we can see the residence is also highlighted on this map of out in Makua for Carly Scott. And so my analysis is that that activity is consistent with being in the area of her residence.
And going to page 5.
As we look at forward in time, we're looking from February 9th still 7:48 to 9:03. We have 2 text messages and 3 calls. We can see that the phone is selecting 2 towers. And again, that tower and sector that is facing west off of the Haleakala, as well as a tower down near her residence. And that tower is 2523 and 22526. And we can see that that sector is also consistent with being in the area of her residence.
And page 6 of the same exhibit 389 for identification.
11:04 to 2:54, 11:04 a.m. to 2:54 p.m. And we have a series of voice and one text message. And again, the phone's still picking sector 2059, facing west off of Haleakala, as well as the same tower previously selected down near the residence, just a different sector. And that sector is reflected as 22524 and 22527. And again, we're still seeing tower and sector selection that's consistent with being in the area of her residence.
And page 7 of the same exhibit.
This is the last, or the activity from 4:07 p.m. to 8:28 p.m. And looking at the records, this is the last voice or text activity that was generated by this phone. And when we look at that, we see that Carly Scott's residence is at the top of the map, and we have tower selection from 429 to 828. Let me just back that up. At 4:07 is the first event, and that is a call off of tower 2172. Now we're seeing a tower that's not consistent with being in the area of the residence, and a tower of 22056 at 429 to 828. And so I believe now the call activity is consistent with being in an area south of the victim's residence.
Now, does it show what type of communication or message was the last message that the phone subscribed to by Carly Scott would have received?
The last activity
Yes.
is at 8:28 p.m. and it is a text message, an inbound text message.
So she's receiving, her phone is receiving a text message.
Yes, sir.
And based on your training, experience, and education in this field, where is her phone likely to be at this point?
At this point, I can't exclude that she's back in the area of her residence with this because the tower is 22056. But it could be anywhere from the residence to south because of that previous tower selection. But we're talking 4 hours in difference. So it's difficult to say with that large of a tower that it has to only be her residence, but that is a possibility.
Okay, thank you, Special Agent Easter. I have no further questions.
Cross-examination, Mr. O'Connor.
Special Agent, would it be accurate to say that you had made what was considered to be a final report relative to these analysis back in December of 2015?
Every report that I provide is obviously available for discovery. I consider the final report the report that is produced for exhibits once we are going to trial and the document is peer reviewed.
That seems to imply that preciseness and accuracy is not important unless and until the case goes to trial. Is that fair to say?
There's an objection, there's an argument, whether it implies anything.
I'll sustain the objection. You may rephrase the question.
Okay. Would it be accurate to say that back in, well, when was the first request that you had to do any analysis regarding any historical phone data in this case?
The first contact I received was in April of 2015.
And would it be accurate to say that that request resulted in a report generated in December of 2015?
Yes.
And did that report, well, let me ask you, what did that report contain back in December of 2015?
It contained very similar things that we see today, which is the analysis of both the defendant's phone as well as Carly Scott's phone for a very similar time period. And so we're still looking at the same phone records from both exhibits, or both maps.
Would it be accurate to say that included in that December 2015 report was one other analysis on a different phone?
Yes, there was a third phone that was reviewed.
Okay, and would it be accurate to say that that phone number that was reviewed was 280-5003?
Yes.
And would it be accurate to say that you were provided information that that number was attributed to Steven Capobianco?
I believe that the number was belonged to somebody that was an associate of Capobianco. I believe, what if I recall, is that they told me that the phone was likely left in the vehicle, if I recall correctly.
Okay, let's see if we can flesh that out. Would you agree with me that in addition to that 5003 number, you were initially given yet another number which started with 264?
I don't remember a fourth number in the case. If you have a prior mapping that for the others, I'd be happy to look at it.
Okay, let me ask you this. Were you asked to analyze historical phone data on a phone that was associated with a Drew Kaiser?
I don't specifically remember that name. It is. I reviewed several phones in this case, and I know we've presented two of them. But if you have any prior mapping, I'd be happy to look at it and review it.
Okay, and what you're sure of is that you presented two today. But let me ask you, relative to your report back in December of 2015, let's see. How many total records do you recall having been asked to analyze?
I remember specifically the two that we looked at, the 5332 for Carly Scott, as well as the defendant's phone, as well as the cell phone ending in 5003. Those are the three that I specifically recall. I don't recall a fourth number being provided, but I'd be happy to look if you have records or any map that was generated by me. I have to review it to make sure it was something that I created.
Okay. Let's see if we can work on that. In terms of your report back in December of 2015, is there a way for you to look at the report and see what or who that number was associated with in terms of the 5003 number? Is that indicated on?
Oftentimes I don't put subscriber information. It always tends to generate an objection. But I'd be happy to look at the subscriber sheet. I'm sure we have that with the records, and I could refer to that for you.
Okay, let's move on from there. But in total, you were, back in December of 2015, you recalled doing 3 analyses. Is that accurate?
Yes.
And as of this date, it's down to 2 in terms of presentation to the jury. Is that accurate?
Yes, we presented 2 mappings.
Okay. Now, in terms of what you testified to today, and let me try to get particular, for example, relative to Exhibit 389, page 10. And that would would be your analysis relative to the phone records of 359-4842 on February 9th for 9:49 p.m. and 11:20 p.m. Is that sorry, it's my first smartphone. I don't know really how to deal with it.
I could probably help you if you'd like.
Different ends of the spectrum.
Yes.
If you have no objection, we can take a recess.
Okay. You recall that particular page that I'm referring to?
I don't. We've looked at a lot of maps there. I'd be happy to pull it up for the jury or produce me the exhibit.
Well, before I get into that, let me ask you, and maybe it disposes of the issue, but you mentioned and you testified relative to taking into consideration in your analysis a percentage that you come up with in terms of how many times that particular phone hits that particular sector. And in this case, I think you testified is about 60%.
Actually, about 62%.
When did you come up with that analysis?
I don't have an exact date of when I did the math on that, but it was rather recent. As I prepared for trial, what I like to do is understand more about what I would expect questions to be, so that I can accurately answer them for people.
Okay, do you recall whether it was after August of this year or before August?
No, it was within the last week. I just don't remember the exact day.
And ultimately, I guess what I'm going to with that is that, did you do that calculation with that updated azimuth that you got?
Well, I received the updated azimuth on August 25th, and so no, it was after that.
So it would have taken that into consideration then?
It would have, but you have to also remember that it wouldn't have changed the 62%, because that's not the number that's being reflected. That sector wasn't the one that's being picked as the most frequent. So the 62% remains unchanged whether it occurred before August 25th or after August 25th. It's still 62%.
Okay. And I guess just for clarification and maybe some education of the jury, what is this azimuth thing that we're talking about?
So azimuth is is sometimes easier described as an orientation. If you've never used a compass, the easiest thing, I can't remember if it was in a previous hearing or here, I use the clock. A clock's an easiest way because everyone's seen the hands of a clock to determine north, south, east, and west. It's easier to understand. But if we were to look at north or 12 o'clock, that's at 0 degrees. And then west is 3 o'clock or 90. South is 6 o'clock or 180, and west is rather 9 o'clock or 270. And so, to understand azimuth, the antennas are projected or aligned to project along an azimuth or orientation to provide coverage. And so, for us to understand the direction that those azimuths are facing, they give us a declination of 30, 60, 90, 180, so that we understand.
Okay, now putting that in context of the substance of page 10 of Exhibit 388, do you recall preparing, I guess, an analysis and a map with that analysis back in December of 2015 relative to this time of February 9th, 9:49 p.m. and 11:20 p.m.?
Yes.
Now, in terms of your preparation of that back in December of 2015, and I guess compared to your analysis done for purposes of this trial, is there any difference in those two?
Yes, and this slide represents the update that I did on August 25th after I learned the correct azimuth. So I made an error myself in December that was caught during the peer review and that I then corrected prior to trial.
So let me ask you this. Prior to that correction, you'd agree with me that when you prepared your reports, for example, all the way up to December of 2015, you reasonably expected the police to rely on your information, right?
I expect them to take in that evidence as, I really could help you if you'd like.
I think I know. Just one second.
Hey, the record should reflect that Mr. Upos having some trouble with his personal phone. And a witness had offered to assist with that.
Okay, I'm sorry. Where were we?
I remember. Would you like me to move? Okay. Yes, I expect them to rely on the information that I provide to them. But when we talk with them, they understand that I'm producing maps that are one part of their investigation. If they are solely only acting on one piece of analysis that I provided, then they're not doing their job, which is to take into account all evidence in their case. And I always provide, please ask questions if necessary. But the reality is, the correction was made because it was caught. And so the goal is to present the most accurate information and most precise information for the jury. And that's what we have here today.
Well, but you'd agree with me, for example, in this circumstance, you did that correction and update in August, well, sometime after August 25th of 2016, correct?
No.
When would that have been?
It was done on August 25th, not after.
You would agree with me that...
Just take the battery out.
All right. Maybe we should present it to the witness and see if he can help us. Mr. Upos' phone is still acting up, so...
I had a flip phone until last week.
I think the phone's objecting to something.
Okay, let me in terms of the well, actually, let me ask you about page 14. Let me ask you this. Relative to your December 2015 analysis of the two phone records that you analyzed here in trial, did anything change in your report substantively?
I feel like I've answered that a few times. Yes, the maps in December contained an error. That error was corrected prior to trial and is reflected here on the maps that are labeled August 25th. So the substance of the analysis can be affected because there was an error. So in the sense that now I see the correct azimuth or present the correct azimuth, yes, there is some change in the substance in terms of my conclusions, but the records never changed themselves. It was just an error that I generated back in August.
Okay, now, you'd agree with me that you testified in a hearing yesterday outside of the presence of the jury, right?
Yes, I did.
And I asked you that same question, whether there were any changes to your report, right?
I'm sure you did. There were several.
And wasn't your answer yesterday that, yeah, there was a change. We added the 12th, an analysis of the 12th, right?
Well, you have to be careful. We didn't present the 12th. So I don't know that that would be relevant here.
Sir, you'd agree with me that your testimony yesterday, when I asked you that same question, was that, yeah, we added an analysis of the 12th, correct?
Your Honor, counsel may be taking this out of context because it was a specific reference to reports as especially we just pointed out, has not been presented. So to use that and to use that to attack Special Agent Easter's credibility with respect to this aspect is taken
At
out of
least for the time
context.
being, I'll overrule the objection. Proceed.
Well, I asked you that yesterday. Your answer was, yeah, we added an analysis of the 12th, right?
Yes, so in addition to the,
Okay, now, but when I asked you yesterday, you didn't say that you made substantive changes based on an updated ASMIS while you were up on the stand, right?
Judge, objection again, this is taken out of context, because on direct, he did testify to making
Judge, this is a
the...
super
Excuse
objection.
me, I'll overrule the objection, you may answer the question.
so I don't specifically recall saying it was not or not substantive. The reality of changing the azimuth or having the updated azimuth does help form my conclusions. Yes, that is my testimony. Now the 12th is not something that was presented, but yes, that was also asked to be included in the updated analysis in August. So yes, I did provide analysis for the 12th, but yet not presented here.
This just goes to my question, or a question that was asked of you yesterday in terms of whether there was any changes made. You agree with me. The only answer you gave was the analysis of the 12th. You didn't mention this whole updated ASMIS. Isn't that accurate?
That's absolutely incorrect. In fact, I recall our conversation in the witness room,
Okay.
and I specifically pointed out to you those azimuths.
Exactly, and that was out in the witness room, not on the stand during the hearing, right?
Judge, again, this is being taken out of context at this point and making it into an argument.
This is exactly what the facts.
The objection is overruled.
You did not divulge that mistake until we went into a conference room and spoke with amongst the lawyers, correct? You didn't tell that mistake to the judge, right?
That's actually also incorrect. We had a meeting about the analysis. It was brought to the attention that there was an update from December to August. We had a sidebar outside where you asked me what those changes were. I informed the defense of those errors as well as the updates of the 12th. We came back in and had a hearing in front of the judge sitting here. And the judge asked me those specific questions. And we went to the exact slides that you're bringing up today. And the judge asked me what those changes were. And I pointed out both of them to the judge.
But it wasn't until you divulged it to us outside in the conference room and you were cross-examined on that further back in court that that actually came out to the judge, right?
So the reality is you're asking if I should have sent you an email and told you, guess what? Check on page 2 and 3 that there's an update. If you guys can't review the updates yourself, I can't do your job for you. The reality is the updates were provided.
The
And
reality
it's your
is,
job to review them.
when I asked you if there were any changes in your report, you should have said that, yeah, I made some substantive changes on page 10 and page 14, right?
I've asked and answered that, and I have told you that there were updates. I've said it here, I said it there, in the witness room, and I said it in front of the judge. I don't know how many more times I could tell you.
And the updates were to correct mistakes that were in your report all the way up to December of 2015, right?
That's not true either.
No further questions, actually.
Any
Real brief,
reexamination?
Speculating, sir, how many calls did the update or the correction with the ASMIT affect?
So there were,
Communications, I'm sorry.
okay, that's easier. There were 27 communications that were affected by that aspect.
And that was reflected in the updates that we just showed.
Correct. Well, and when I say the update affected 27, that's in the totality of the records. I didn't review all 27 because that weren't part of the time period that you requested.
Okay. So for the time period that we requested, that was submitted in the updated data that we went over through your direct testimony. How many communications did that affect for the time period that was requested?
I'm going to check this to relevance, because I think some of what was requested included the 12, which was not testified to.
Excluding the 12.
I'll sustain the objection and ask you to rephrase the question, please.
Thank you, Your Honor. Okay, from the time period from February 8th through February 11th, that time period in 2014, how many communications did the correction in the ASMIT, how many communications did that affect?
Okay. If I could refer to People's 389, I could add those up for us and provide a
This
correct
would
answer.
be 388.
388?
Yeah, the defendant's on the.
Okay, 388.
Then I may approach with the exhibit.
Yes.
Thank you.
And we're going going to exclude the 12th.
That's correct. Do you need the December to assist you with the December cast mapping?
No.
Okay. So are you able to answer that question after reviewing State's Exhibit 288 for identification?
Yes, sir. The updated azimuth would have affected 7 events or communications during that time period from February 9th to February 11th.
And there may approach to retrieve the document.
Yes.
You know, no further questions.
No further questions from the defense. Thank you, sir.
All right. Are there any juror questions?
Yes, sir.
Counsel, please. Ladies and gentlemen, I was just trying to gauge, to play it safe, what we're going to do is we'll take our lunch recess now. We'll take up the jury questions after the recess. The reason is I have to chair a statewide meeting by teleconference. And I have to go to another room for that, and that starts at noon. My concern is that we'll get caught right in the middle of the witnesses' answers to some of your questions, and I don't want to do that. So we'll take our lunch recess and reconvene at 1:30. Thank you so much.